Maidul, I think first of all, thank you for writing this book. It's a very important and timely book. And also, thank you for asking me to be a discussant. I have read the book, and I must say that the issues that have been raised are extremely important. They do not just they're not circumscribed to the next election or the one after that. This is pretty much about a vision of what we want to be as a country. Now let me make the first point about neoliberalism, because I thought that's an important point. I think the variant of neoliberalism that we have followed in this country is pretty much the Anglo-American one. Now, in all these countries which have followed the Anglo-American variant of neoliberalism, I think there's a certain moment of reckoning that arrives in which these nations decide what kind of countries they want to be. Now, the Americans decided in 2016 they want to be a pretty nasty one with Trump. The Brits decided that they want to be a pretty nasty one with Brexit. Okay, it's still unfolding. I mean, yesterday Theresa May lost again, 149 votes. But I think the moment of reckoning for India is now arriving. This election is an important election. I don't think the Indian nation state has witnessed a more make or break election as this one. This election perhaps will decide the kind of country that we want to be. Do we want to be nasty? Do we want to be accommodative? Do we want to be compassionate? Do we want to be kind-hearted? Do we want to be socialist? It's there in the constitution. I think there's something to be said about neoliberal politics. Okay, and let me just perhaps spend 2.5 minutes saying something else. My understanding of neoliberal politics flows from a pretty good book that I've read that came out 3 or 4 years ago by Daniel Steadman Jones,
exactly.
Masters of the Universe, and Hayek, Friedman, and the birth of neoliberal politics.
Right.
Now, as far as I can understand it, neoliberalism is premised upon two postulates of 19th century neoclassical economics. One of them is the perfectly rational individual, which exists nowhere in the world. Second is the perfectly competitive market, which exists nowhere in the world. Now, it's on these two false premises that the whole neoliberal edifice, the whole neoliberal political edifice has been created. Now, it is no wonder that neoliberal politics will configure a politics that is blinkered, that is narrow, that is constricted, that is parochial, that is downright nasty. So the reason why America has become Trump's America, the reason why Thatcherite Britain has become the mess that Brexit is, the reason why we are well on our way to the mess that we have made for ourselves is precisely this blinkered vision of neoliberal politics. A politics that is not capacious enough to understand that there is something called the common good. Now, quite often the common good becomes the national interest. Now, the national interest is not the common good, because the national interest is a narrowly defined set of parameters created by strategic experts. So I think what we need, and I completely appreciate the points that you made in the epilogue, what we need right now is certainly to kind of get our heads together and wrap our heads around the kind of politics that we want to envision. Now, what does that mean? That means that democracy will have to now start thinking about envisioning a certain spirit, a certain public spiritedness. What has happened to neoliberal democracy is that it has completely eviscerated any possibility of a public spiritedness. Now, that has happened because of the complete erosion of the public good. So increasingly what you have is the classical traditional public goods like education, healthcare and housing have all become private commoditized good under the aegis of neoliberalism. This is, I think, one of the reasons why we have this nastiness in politics. So I think it's important. I completely agree with you on the points about in the epilogue. I'll come to that. That what perhaps the next few years will require is a democratic politics. Okay, not the kind of democracy, the neoliberal democracy that we have become used to, where you have a symbolic once in 5 year casting of votes, and that's the end of it. But a democratic politics that can engender the possibility of a genuine public spiritedness that then creates a common good. And therefore, this would also redefine what it means to be a citizen. Okay? Now, having made that point, let me also say that one of the things that I have really felt has made the situation across the world in terms of democracy really bad is a certain kind of ubiquitous nation state. Now, aggressive nation states across the world. Now, by the way, we want to become like the Israelis, and that horrifies me. I mean, if you want to become like the Israelis, that means that you will want to become a country that is responsible for the longest military occupation in recent history, Palestine. I mean, that's horrendous. Is that the kind of country we want to become? We're obviously not thinking. So the point that I'm making is that a certain aggressive nation state wants people to believe that terrorism is the single most important issue in the world. This is a statement that is made ad nauseum, ad infinitum, by politicians, and you know the kind of politicians that I'm talking about. Now, I'm not denying that terrorism is a problem, but in exactly the same way that climate change is a problem, and climate change may need nation states to come together, terrorism will require a larger international legal architecture. where the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, becomes the legal architecture in which issues of this kind can be addressed. Now, just to kind of give you a statistic, I'm not good with statistics. My favorite quote on statistics is Mark Twain. There are lies, there are damned lies, and then there are statistics. But one interesting statistic that I came across in a right-wing magazine commentary is that the statistical possibilities of being killed in a terrorist attack are as minimal as dying in a bathtub.
That's right.
Now look at the number of times that this is being kind of thrust upon people, that this is the biggest threat in the world. And this is also part of the larger nation-state neoliberalism securitization agenda.
Absolutely.
Where you create this idea that people are under threat, you have gated communities, you have private security agencies, and so on and so forth. So therefore, the politics that we're talking about is a politics that would have to really kind of think about this. Now this brings me to my last point, which is the whole question of the Muslims, which I haven't talked about so far. Muslim politics, okay? I don't know where to begin, because obviously this is one of those things that really baffles me. I think that the Indian Muslim engagement with secularism, and I'm going to put this very bluntly, has been plain opportunistic. Okay, it's been secularist when it suited it, non-secularist when it hasn't suited it. Secularist when it's a question of personal law, and non-secularist in terms of a secularization or democratization of the community. And I think this is what has provided grist to the Hindutva mill of appeasement.
Right.
So it doesn't arise from anywhere. And therefore what we need is a completely different vision of secularism, not some kind of a tinkering here and there, a completely different kind of secularism, where perhaps the very social contract is re-envisioned about what it means to be a religious believer, what it means to be an agnostic, what it means to be an atheist for that matter. Okay, I think this is something that really becomes very, very important. I want to quickly talk about Islamophobia because this is a problem. I was just reading an article about the British Labour Party. You mentioned Corbyn. I happen to be a great fan of Corbyn, though I must say that he takes a long time to kind of come to certain political strategies. Well, he's pretty old. But it's interesting that in the British situation, the British Labour Party has been accused of anti-Semitism. The Conservative Party has been accused of Islamophobia. Now, the sustained attack that the British Labour Party comes under, because of its anti-Semitism, is nothing compared to what the British Conservative Party comes under when it comes to Islamophobia. I mean, there has been absolutely no movement. Baroness Varsi, one British politician who resigned from the cabinet, had to make 18 complaints before some cognizance was taken of the whole thing. So therefore, what I am suggesting is that Islamophobia certainly is a problem. This is something that Muslims and the larger politics will have to come to terms with. But it cannot just be done solely in terms of Muslim identity. The vision of radical democracy, I think, is significant, because what you need, when I vaguely remember reading Shatta Mouf some years ago on radical democracy in the 1990s book, but one of the things that they say is that radical democracy would have to learn from the mistakes of social democracy of the post-Second World War period. Absolutely. If I can make my last comment with Biju's permission, which is something I've forgotten, and actually give me half a second to kind of get my train of thought back. Yes, which is this. What we see in India is an impoverished, bankrupt politics. This is a politics that cannot see beyond economic growth figures. Even that it can't do. Even that it makes a mess of. Now, I think this is the end of the road of a politics that genuflects to the economics, to the economic. That all that it can do is facilitate economic growth. In the 1990s, the slogan was, "It's the economy, stupid." It's not the economy. Politics is more than the economy. It's about the kind of society that we want to live in. It is about justice, it is about compassion, it is about kindness. At the end of it all, it is about the society that we want to create. And therefore, perhaps the last point that I will make is, what we need to think about is the possibilities of the political to transcend this narrow politics. And I'm there.